Life ain't about sitting back, waiting for the perfect moment. It's about moving G. It's about D key and G. It's about stepping into the fire when everybody else is still thinking about the heat. Overthinking steals your power, but a CTO builds your legacy. Today, we ain't talking about tomorrow. We're talking about what you're gonna deal. Your IGHT Nandibu. Action creates clarity, not thoughts. That's the truth people don't want to hear because it demands responsibility. We live in a world that praises the thinker, the planner, the dreamer. We sit in rooms, we talk about strategy, we draw diagrams, we make lists, and somehow we start convincing ourselves that all of this mental activity is the same as progress. But it's not. You can think all day long. You can plan all year. You can build the perfect idea in your mind, but until your feet move, until your hands work, until your body shows up in the arena, you don't know anything. Thoughts are theories. Action is proof, and proof brings clarity. Clarity doesn't come from wondering how things might turn out. Clarity doesn't come from sitting on the sidelines asking, what if? It doesn't come from playing the scenarios over and over in your head. Clarity comes when you step on the field. Clarity comes when the first punch is thrown. Clarity comes when you hear the whistle, when you hear the crowd, when you feel the sweat running down your back and the pressure in your chest. That's when you know. That's when the fog lifts. Because when you act, the truth gets revealed. Most people waste their lives searching for certainty before they act. They wait for the right time, the perfect plan, the guarantee of success. But let me ask you, when has life ever given guarantees? When has anything worth having ever been handed to you without risk? Waiting for certainty is the fastest way to get stuck in the mud. You sit there spinning your wheels, building castles in your mind, but you're not moving forward. Action is the great separator, the great clarifier. You don't need to know every step before you take the first one. You don't need the whole map before you start the journey. You just need to move, and with every move, the path reveals itself. Think about a runner in the dark. He doesn't see the finish line. Every step lights up the next step. That's what action does. You don't get to see the whole thing. But when you move, when you commit, life responds. Opportunities appear. People show up. Doors open. That's clarity. But you don't see it until you act. The problem is most people confuse clarity with comfort. They think they'll feel comfortable once they're clear. They think clarity means no fear, no doubt, no risk. But clarity doesn't erase fear. It sharpens it. It shows you what's real and what's not. It shows you the difference between the story in your head and the reality on the ground. You don't eliminate uncertainty by thinking harder. You eliminate it by acting bolder. Every championship team I've ever been on, we didn't win because we had the perfect playbook. We didn't win because we sat in film study for months and memorized every scenario. We won because when the moment came, we acted. We lined up, we hit, we adjusted. The field gave us feedback, and we adjusted again. And with every play, with every hit, we got clear on what needed to be done. The plan didn't make us winners. The action did. And it's the same off the field. You want to start a business. You can read books for 10 years. You can attend seminars. You can watch 100 YouTube videos about entrepreneurship, but you will never know what it takes until you open the doors, until you make the call, until you sell the product, until you face rejection. That first move will teach you more than all the theory combined. You want to get in shape. You can scroll fitness programs all day, watch videos, argue about diets. But clarity doesn't come from theory. It comes when you lace up your shoes, step into the gym, and feel the weight in your hands. That's when you find out what you're made of. That's when you find out what works for you, what doesn't. Action carves away the confusion. Clarity is earned. It's not a gift. It's not a lecture. It's not a thought experiment. It's earned in the dirt, in the grind, in the sweat. And the reason most people never get clear is because they never get dirty. They want a clean victory. They want to sit in a chair, draw up a master plan, and walk out untouched. That's not clarity, that's fantasy. When you act, you force yourself into the truth. You can't hide from yourself anymore. That's why most people avoid it. Thinking is safe. Planning is safe. Talking is safe. You can sit around with your friends and feel smart, feel in control. But action exposes you. It shows your weaknesses. It humbles you. It tells you exactly where you are, not where you hope to be. But that's the gift. That's clarity. You know why champions rise? Because they don't wait to have it figured out. They step into the fight with questions still unanswered. They step in with doubt in their mind. But when the whistle blows, when the action starts, they get clear real quick. The game doesn't wait for your confidence. The game doesn't pause while you figure things out. The game demands action, and only those who step forward see the truth. The mind is a liar sometimes. It tells you stories. It tells you why you can't do it, why it won't work, why you're not ready. And if you listen too long, you start to believe it. But action doesn't lie. Action gives you results. Even failure is clarity. Even falling on your face gives you a truth that thinking never could. Failure says, that didn't work. And guess what? Now you know. You know what to adjust, what to change, what to try next. But if you only think, you never find out. You live in the fog forever. That's why hesitation is deadly. Every second you spend overthinking is a second stolen from clarity. You could have learned by now. You could have failed by now. You could have adjusted by now. Instead, you're still waiting for the stars to align. They won't. They never will. The stars don't align until you start moving. And then you realize they were aligned all along. Action creates clarity because it makes the invisible visible. It turns dreams into data. It turns maybe into last or no. It turns, I think, into I know. You can't think your way into certainty, but you can act your way into it. That's why momentum matters. The more you move, the clearer the picture becomes. People think clarity is found in the library, in the notebook, in the whiteboard. But clarity lives in the fight. Clarity lives in the conversation you're afraid to have. Clarity lives in the risk you're afraid to take. Clarity lives in the decision you keep putting off. When you finally act, the truth shows up. It might not be the truth you wanted, but it's the truth you needed. And once you have it, you can build. So many people never start because they don't want to be wrong. They don't want to take the wrong step, make the wrong move. But let me tell you, wrong moves teach you more than no moves. A wrong move shows you the edge of the map. It shows you the limits. It shows you what to avoid. That's clarity. No move leaves you blind. You're stuck in the dark, circling the same thoughts, paralyzed by the same fears. Action breaks the cycle. I've seen it over and over. People who waited, people who thought they were being smart by delaying action until the time was right. Years later, they're in the same spot. Same excuses, same plans, no progress. And then I've seen the ones who jumped. They didn't know all the answers. They didn't have all the details, but they acted. And 5 years later, their clarity is unmatched. Why? Because they earned it through action. Every battle you face in life is a mirror. It shows you where you stand. You might think you're strong, but until you act, you don't know. You might think you're ready, but until you act, you don't know. You might think you have a plan, but until you act, you don't know. Action is the mirror. It doesn't flatter you. It doesn't lie to you. It doesn't sugarcoat anything. It tells you the truth. That truth may sting, but it will set you free. Most people don't lack clarity. They lack courage. They already know what to do. Deep down, they already know the first step. The problem is not knowing, it's doing. It's the gap between the thought and the action that kills dreams. The longer you wait, the louder doubt becomes. The longer you hesitate, the harder it gets to move. But the moment you act, the chains break, the fog lifts, the power returns. That's why clarity feels so rare. Not because it's hard to find, but because so few are willing to act to get it. They'd rather wait for a sign. They'd rather pray for certainty. They'd rather collect information endlessly. But life rewards the mover. Life rewards the one who steps forward in the dark. That's where clarity lives. Overthinking is fear disguised as logic. People don't like to admit that because it sounds weak and nobody wants to be called afraid. So we cover it up with smart words. We call it analyzing. We call it preparing. We call it being cautious. But at the root, most overthinking is nothing but fear wearing a suit. It's the voice in your head dressed up in intelligence, trying to convince you that waiting is wise, that hesitation is smart, that holding back is the safer play. But strip it down, and you'll find it's just fear keeping you stuck. Fear is sneaky. It doesn't always roar at you. It doesn't always show up as panic. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it sounds like reason. Wait until the timing is perfect. It says, think about every possible outcome. It says, don't move yet. You're not ready. And because it sounds rational, because it feels responsible, people believe it. They sit there running scenarios in their mind, wearing themselves out, convincing themselves that they're being smart. But deep down, what they're really doing is hiding. They're hiding from the risk, from the discomfort, from the unknown. Fear loves the mind that won't stop thinking. Because the more you think, the bigger fear gets. The more you analyze, the more shadows you create. You see danger where there is none. You see failure before you've even tried. You see enemies that don't exist. That's what fear does. It multiplies in the silence of hesitation. It feeds on delay. It grows stronger with every minute you spend overthinking. And here's the truth. The mind will never run out of things to worry about. If you give it permission, it will spin forever. There will always be one more scenario to consider, one more what if to analyze, one more problem to solve before you move. Overthinking is like quicksand. The more you struggle inside it, the deeper you sink. You think you're making progress because your brain is busy, but in reality, you're stuck. Your thoughts are running marathons while your feet never leave the ground. Look at the people who get ahead in life. They're not the ones who never feel fear. They're the ones who recognize fear for what it is. They see through the disguise. They know when logic has turned into delay. They know when preparation has turned into paralysis. And instead of letting fear run the show, they act. They step forward while their brain is still buzzing with doubt. They don't wait for the noise to stop because it never stops. They move anyway. And that's why they win. Overthinking convinces you that you're being safe. But really, it's the most dangerous thing you can do. Because every second you spend trapped in your head is a second stolen from your life. Opportunities don't wait around while you weigh the pros and cons. Doors don't stay open forever. While you're busy calculating, someone else is acting. While you're frozen by fear, someone else is moving, learning, failing, adjusting, succeeding. By the time you're ready, they're already miles ahead. Fear is not a problem until it controls you. And when you overthink, that's exactly what happens. You hand over the wheel. You give fear the keys and say, drive me wherever you want. And fear never drives you forward. It only drives you in circles. That's why overthinkers always feel exhausted. Their mind is sprinting, but their life is standing still. They confuse motion for progress. They confuse thought for action. But the scoreboard doesn't lie. Life only rewards execution. The mind is a tool, but it's not the master. If you let your mind run unchecked, it will build cages. It will build walls out of every possibility, every danger, and every doubt. And before you know it, you're trapped. You're not free to move because you've convinced yourself that movement equals risk. But what you don't realize is that not moving is the biggest risk of all. Fear wants you to believe that staying still is safe, but staying still is how you get left behind. Think about the greatest moments in history, the breakthroughs, the victories, the champions. Do you think they never had doubts? Do you think they never asked, what if this goes wrong? Of course they did. But they understood something. Fear only wins if you give it the microphone. Fear only wins if you let it disguise itself as logic. When you rip off the disguise and call it what it is, fear loses its power. You stop giving it respect. You stop treating it like wisdom. You treat it like an enemy, and then you fight it with action. The dangerous thing about overthinking is that it feels responsible. It feels like you're being smart. It feels like you're being careful. But being careful is not the same as being effective. Playing it safe is not the same as winning. You can prepare forever and still lose. You can analyze every outcome and still fail. But you will never succeed without action. You will never find out what you're capable of if you never step up and try. Overthinking is also addictive because every time you delay action, you get a small hit of relief. You feel like you dodged danger. You feel like you made the smart choice. And that relief becomes a habit. The brain learns that hesitation equals safety. So the next time, the hesitation is even stronger. The cycle repeats until years go by, and you realize you've been standing still, mistaking thought for progress. That's the trap. That's how fear disguised as logic robs people of their potential. If you want proof, just look at your own life. Think of the things you've been putting off, the decisions you've delayed, the risks you've avoided. How many of them were really about needing more information? And how many of them were just fear dressed up as planning? Be honest. How many times did you already know what you needed to do, but you waited because it felt safer to keep thinking? How many chances did you miss because fear tricked you into believing you weren't ready? The cure for overthinking is not more thinking. The cure is movement. The cure is action. Not reckless action, but decisive action. Because once you move, the fog lifts. The fear loses its grip. You realize most of the things you were worrying about never even show up. 90% of the scenarios you built in your head were lies. And the ones that do show up, you handle. You figure it out as you go because that's what humans do. That's what winners do. When you stop overthinking, you stop giving fear the chance to grow. You cut it off before it multiplies. You meet it head on before it has the chance to disguise itself. You start to see fear for what it is: energy. And energy can be redirected. Instead of letting it paralyze you, you use it to push forward. That's what courage really is. Not the absence of fear, but the decision to act while fear is still present. People think clarity comes first, then courage, then action. But it's the other way around. Action comes first. Action creates clarity. And once you're clear, courage grows. But when you overthink, you never get to clarity. You're stuck in a loop where fear keeps feeding itself. Fear creates thought, thought creates hesitation, hesitation creates more fear. The cycle only breaks when you act. Overthinking is fear disguised as logic, but it's also pride disguised as humility. Because deep down, when you overthink, you're saying, I can predict everything. I can outsmart uncertainty. I can avoid all pain if I just think hard enough. That's pride. That's arrogance. Life doesn't work like that. You don't get to outthink risk. You don't get to outplan failure. You face it. You endure it. You learn from it. And you keep moving. Fear will never stop dressing itself up. It will always come in new disguises. Sometimes it'll sound like wisdom. Sometimes it'll sound like caution. Sometimes it'll sound like patience. But you have to train yourself to recognize its voice. You have to get ruthless about calling it out. You have to ask yourself, am I thinking or am I hiding? Am I analyzing or am I stalling? Am I preparing or am I protecting myself from risk? The answer will expose fear's disguise. The greatest freedom you can give yourself is the freedom from overthinking. The moment you stop letting fear dress itself up as logic, you free yourself to move. You free yourself to try, to fail, to grow. You stop waiting for the perfect moment, and you realize the perfect moment is the one you create. Fear hates that. Fear hates when you move without its permission. Fear hates when you refuse to listen. That's how you win. Small daily moves beat perfect plans. That's the truth most people don't want to accept because it feels too simple. We live in a culture that worships the big moment, the grand breakthrough, the overnight success. We think everything depends on having the flawless blueprint, the perfect strategy, the master plan that guarantees victory. But life doesn't reward perfection. It rewards persistence. The wins don't come from waiting until everything is perfectly aligned. They come from stacking small moves, one on top of the other, until momentum carries you where the plan never could. Everybody wants the highlight reel, but nobody wants the practice tape. Everybody wants to shine under the lights, but they forget about the thousands of unseen reps it takes to get there. That's the difference between dreamers and doers. Dreamers are obsessed with the perfect plan. Doers are obsessed with consistent movement. The dreamer wants to know every step before taking the first one. The doer just takes the first step, and then another, and then another. And by the time the dreamer is still planning, the doer has already built something real. Small daily moves don't look like much in the moment. That's why most people overlook them. You wake up and do the push-ups. You make the extra sales call. You read the pages of the book. You write the paragraph. You practice the drill. And at the end of the day, it doesn't feel like you changed the world. But stack those days for a year and the world is unrecognizable. That's how greatness is built, quietly, consistently, through small steps executed daily. Perfection is an illusion. It's the trick fear uses to keep you waiting. Don't act until the plan is flawless. That's what fear whispers. But here's the truth. There will never be a flawless plan. Life is too unpredictable. Circumstances change. Obstacles appear. No matter how perfect your strategy looks on paper, the moment you step into the real world, it gets punched in the mouth. That's why small moves matter more. They give you the ability to adjust, to adapt, to learn as you go. A perfect plan might look beautiful in theory, but it breaks under pressure. Daily moves bend, shift, and evolve with reality. Think about a sculptor. He doesn't carve a masterpiece in one swing. He chips away piece by piece, day after day. Each stroke is small, almost insignificant on its own. But put them together, and you get art that lasts for centuries. That's what small daily moves do to your life. They sculpt your future in ways you can't always see in the moment. When you chase perfect plans, you end up paralyzed. You spend weeks, months, even years mapping things out, and still you don't move. You want certainty before you act. And because certainty never comes, you stay stuck. Small moves don't require certainty. They require courage. They require discipline. They require the humility to start where you are with what you have, knowing it's not perfect, knowing you'll make mistakes, but moving anyway. Champions are built into small moves. Nobody applauds. You don't see the hours in the gym when the cameras aren't there. You don't see the meals prepped, the sleep scheduled, the sacrifices made. You see the trophy lifted, the speech given, the record broken. But none of that happens without the daily grind. That's why small daily moves are more powerful than any perfect plan. They get done, they build habits, they create momentum. And momentum beats perfection every single time. Momentum is a force most people underestimate. When you take small steps consistently, you start to build energy. At first, it feels slow. The changes are invisible. But then, little by little, the compounding effect kicks in. One rep becomes a routine. One routine becomes a lifestyle. One choice becomes your identity. That's when you look up and realize you've covered miles while others are still standing at the starting line debating which road to take. People talk about motivation like it's the secret. They say I'll move when I feel motivated. But motivation is fickle. It shows up when it wants, and it disappears just as quickly. Discipline is what gets you moving when motivation is gone. And discipline is built through small daily moves. You don't need to feel like doing everything. You just need to do something. That something becomes momentum, and momentum creates its own fuel. Before you know it, the habit carries you further than motivation ever could. The pursuit of perfect plans is really the pursuit of control. People don't want to risk failure. They want to be certain that when they move, everything will work out. But failure is not the enemy. Failure is feedback. Failure is part of the process. Small daily moves allow you to fail safely, to fail quickly, to learn without losing everything. A perfect plan, by contrast, often leads to catastrophic failure because you wait too long. You put all your hope into one giant leap. And when it doesn't work, you're crushed. Small steps protect you from that. They give you room to adjust. They make failure survivable, even useful. You can't outrun time, but you can outlast it. Small daily moves take advantage of time's greatest gift, compounding. Just like money in an account grows with interest, effort grows with consistency. One workout won't change your body. One conversation won't change your relationship. One day of discipline won't change your destiny. But compound them, stack them, refuse to quit, and the results become undeniable. The enemy of progress is not failure, it's delay. It's the waiting game. It's the obsession with perfect timing and perfect planning. How many people spend their whole lives waiting to start? Waiting until they're ready? Waiting until the kids are grown? Waiting until the job slows down? Waiting until they feel confident? And then one day they look back and realize they waited their life away. Perfect plans kept them still. Small moves could have carried them across mountains. This is why small moves are powerful. They're within your control. You might not be able to control the economy, the market, the weather, or the competition, but you can control the push-up you do this morning. You can control the phone call you make today. You can control the page you write, the mile you run, the extra rep you squeeze out. That's power. And when you stack enough of those small, controllable moves, you realize you don't need a perfect plan. You've been building the future brick by brick, day after day. Greatness is not built in the spotlight. It's built in the shadows of discipline. It's built when nobody is clapping, when nobody is watching, when nobody is posting about it. And that's why small moves feel unimportant, because nobody notices them. But the day will come when the spotlight shines, and then everybody will notice the results. They'll call it talent, they'll call it luck, they'll call it destiny. But you'll know the truth. It wasn't a perfect plan. It was small daily moves executed relentlessly. The pursuit of perfection is often an excuse to avoid the discomfort of starting. People say, I'm just waiting until I know more. I'm just waiting until I have the right equipment. I'm just waiting until I can do it properly. But that waiting is just fear in disguise. Because starting is scary. Starting means you're a beginner. Starting means you'll look foolish, you'll stumble, you'll get it wrong. Small moves demand humility. They demand you start where you are, not where you wish you were. But that humility is what leads to mastery. No one begins at the top. Everyone begins with small moves. Look at any great achievement in history. It wasn't the product of one perfect plan. It was the accumulation of thousands of imperfect actions. Thomas Edison didn't sit down and write a flawless blueprint for the light bulb. He tested thousands of times. Each test was a small move. Each failure was data. And eventually success was inevitable. That's the power of small daily moves. They turn failure into progress because every move teaches you something. The danger of chasing perfect plans is that they keep you focused on the future instead of the present. You're always preparing for someday, but someday never comes. Small moves pull you back into the present. They force you to ask, what can I do today? What's the next step I can take right now? That mindset is powerful because it shifts you from dreaming to doing. It shifts you from talking to executing. And execution is what separates the successful from the stuck. When you train yourself to value small daily moves, you free yourself from the pressure of perfection. You stop needing to know everything before you begin. You stop needing every condition to be right. You just move. And as you move, clarity comes, courage grows, and results appear. The perfect plan never would have given you that. Only action can. Only repetition can. Only persistence can. Small daily moves beat perfect plans because they're real. They're tangible. They get done. And when you do them long enough, they add up to a life that no perfect plan could have predicted. The vision becomes reality, not because you thought it into existence, but because you worked it into existence. One move at a time, day after day, until people look at you and say, "How did you do it?" And the answer is simple: consistency over perfection, discipline over dreaming, small moves over perfect plans. Consistency wins over intensity. Most people don't want to hear that because intensity feels sexy. Intensity feels powerful. Intensity looks good on camera, looks good in a post, looks good when you're fired up for a day or two. People love intensity because it gives them a rush. They get hyped up. They push hard for a short burst, and for a moment they feel unstoppable. But then the fire dies down, the energy fades, and they go right back to where they started. Consistency doesn't give you that rush. Consistency doesn't look glamorous, but consistency is what builds empires. Intensity gets attention, but consistency gets results. You can go to the gym one day and destroy yourself with a 2-hour workout. You can post about it, brag about it, and for a moment you feel like you've changed your life. But what happens the next day when your body is sore, when your motivation is gone? Most people quit. They sprint for a moment, then collapse. But the person who goes for 30 minutes a day, 5 times a week, without the fanfare, without the hype, without posting about it, that's the person who actually transforms. Intensity burns bright, but consistency burns long. And the long burn always wins. The reason consistency beats intensity is simple: consistency compounds. Intensity doesn't. One extreme effort won't change your life. One weekend of hustle won't build your dream. One passionate speech won't transform your habits. But daily repetition, steady progress, showing up again and again, even when it's boring, that builds momentum. And momentum compounds into mastery. It's not about what you can do in a burst of energy. It's about what you can sustain when the excitement is gone. Intensity is about emotion. Consistency is about commitment. Anyone can get emotional for a moment. Anyone can scream, push, grind for a day. But very few can make a promise to themselves and keep it when nobody's watching, when nobody's clapping, when it's just you and the work. That's consistency. That's discipline. That's the real separator. When you look at champions, you don't see people who are just intense. You see people who are consistent. The highlight reels show the big plays, the roaring crowds, the emotional victories. But what you don't see are the mornings when the champion woke up tired and still trained. You don't see the days when motivation was gone and they still showed up. You don't see the lonely hours of repetition, drilling the same movements over and over until they were automatic. Intensity got them started, but consistency kept them climbing. Intensity is like a spark. It can light a fire, but without fuel, the fire dies. Consistency is the fuel. It feeds the flame day after day until the fire becomes unstoppable. That's why people who rely only on intensity never last. They burn hot, they burn quick, and they burn out. The consistent ones may not look as impressive at first, but over time, they are the ones who outlast everyone else. Consistency doesn't care about mood. It doesn't care if you feel like it. It doesn't care if the conditions are perfect. Consistency just demands that you show up. And the more you show up, the stronger you get, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. You build trust with yourself. You build an identity. You stop being the person who quits, the person who starts and stops, and you become the person who finishes. That identity becomes unshakable, and no amount of intensity can replace it. Think about farming. You don't plant seeds one day, water them intensely for 12 hours, and expect to harvest the next morning. That's not how growth works. You water daily. You tend the soil daily. You pull weeds daily. And then over time, the crops appear. Consistency is nature's law. The earth doesn't reward bursts of effort. It rewards steady care. Your goals, your dreams, your body, your relationships, they all work the same way. The problem is most people are addicted to intensity because intensity feels like progress. It feels like something big is happening. Consistency feels too slow, too quiet, too invisible. But invisible progress is still progress. The small gains, the tiny improvements, the days when you feel like nothing is happening. Those are the days when the foundation is being laid. And when the foundation is strong, the results come crashing in all at once. People call it sudden success, but it was never sudden. It was consistency cashing its checks. Intensity can be a weapon, but only when it's placed on top of consistency. Use intensity to break through barriers, to push past limits, to spark momentum. But don't confuse intensity for the main ingredient. It's just seasoning. The meal is consistency. Without the meal, the seasoning means nothing. Life is not about what you do once, it's about what you do daily. Success is not built in explosive moments. It's built in quiet habits. And the truth is, most people would rather chase the high of intensity than commit to the grind of consistency. That's why gyms are packed in January and empty in March. That's why people start businesses with excitement and shut them down when the excitement dies. That's why people declare bold goals out loud and then abandon them when nobody is looking. They had intensity, but they lacked consistency. Consistency is boring, but boring is powerful. Boring builds the skill. Boring builds the body. Boring builds the empire. Boring creates the unshakable confidence that no one can take from you. Because when you've shown up day after day, when you've stacked the hours, when you've put in the reps, you don't need hype to fuel you. You know who you are. You know what you've done. You know you can deliver. That kind of confidence doesn't come from a weekend of intensity. It comes from years of consistency. Intensity is loud, consistency is quiet. But quiet strength is the one that lasts. The loud roar fades, the quiet force grows. When you're consistent, you're not chasing motivation, you're building systems. You're not chasing excitement, you're building discipline. And discipline beats motivation every single time. Because discipline doesn't care if you're tired, if you're bored, if you're uninspired. Discipline just gets the job done. Consistency also builds resilience. When you show up every day, you learn to deal with failure, with setbacks, with obstacles. You stop seeing them as reasons to quit and start seeing them as part of the process. Intense people quit when they hit a wall because they expected intensity to carry them through everything. Consistent people push against the wall day after day until the wall cracks. That patience, that persistence, that refusal to stop, that's what creates breakthroughs. Most people live in cycles of intensity and collapse. They go hard, then they crash. They get motivated, then they give up. They swing between extremes. But consistency stabilizes you. It gives you balance. It gives you a rhythm. It keeps you moving forward even when life throws chaos at you. And because you're steady, you keep gaining ground while everyone else is stuck in cycles of starting and stopping. Think about how the seasons work. The sun doesn't blast the earth with intensity one day and then disappear for weeks. It rises every morning, steady, consistent, reliable. And because it shows up daily, life grows. The sun is not dramatic, it's dependable. That's why it sustains everything on this planet. Be like the sun. Show up daily. Be dependable. Bring your energy consistently, not explosively. That's what sustains growth. The truth is, Intensity without consistency is just wasted energy. It looks powerful, but it doesn't last. It's like sprinting as hard as you can for 10 seconds and then collapsing. You went all out, but you didn't get far. Consistency is like running at a steady pace for miles. It might not look as impressive in the moment, but when the race is over, the steady runner is the one who finishes. Consistency is also about trust. When people know you're consistent, they trust you. They know you'll show up. They know you'll deliver. They know you won't flake out when things get hard. Intense people break trust because they're unpredictable. They might show up in a blaze of glory, but you can't count on them tomorrow. Consistent people earn trust because they don't depend on emotion, they depend on discipline. And trust is one of the most valuable currencies in life. You can't fake consistency. You can fake intensity. You can act fired up. You can put on a show. You can scream and shout and pretend you're all in. But you can't fake showing up every day. You can't fake years of repetition. You can't fake the results that consistency brings. That's why consistent people don't need to talk about what they're doing. Their results speak louder than words. If you want to separate yourself, don't focus on being the most intense person in the room. Focus on being the most consistent. Let others burn themselves out with spurts of energy. You keep moving steady and strong. Because in the end, the one who keeps showing up is the one who wins. Intensity might get you started, but only consistency will carry you across the finish line.